Welcome to Behind the Book, a series on author notes where historical fiction authors share the inspiration, research, and stories behind their novels. Today, I'm joined by historical fiction author Michelle Cox to talk about her novel, The Fallen Woman's Daughter. Some historical fiction begins with a question that refuses to fade about a life, a choice, or a moment in time that history only partially remembers. And in this conversation, Michelle shares the inspiration behind her story, the premise of the novel, and the characters and research that stayed with her long after the writing was done. Let's step behind the book. What inspired the story?
So I heard this story when I was working at a nursing home on the northwest side of Chicago in the early 90s. And this woman that I interviewed had this amazing story, so that almost everything that happens in this book actually really did happen. And what was so great about this particular story was that I was also able to interview her daughter, who is also in the book. So I was able to get two perspectives on what really happened in their life, and that actually forms the core of the book is how these two different people, mother and daughter, saw the same situation unfold.
What is the story's premise?
So The Fallen Woman's Daughter is a historical women's fiction novel. It's told in dual timeline from two different perspectives, from the mother and the daughters. That would be Gertie and Nora. It starts in the 1920s and it goes until the 1960s. So it's about the main character is Gertie, or I should say one of the main characters is Gertie, and she is growing up in a coal mining town in southern Iowa in the 20s. And a carnival comes through town and she runs away with the carnival barker, thinking that she is embarking on this life of adventure and excitement. So alternately, in the 1930s, two little girls, Nora and Patsy, have been taken from their mother by the state and sent to a school for girls from broken homes. So these two girls wait patiently week after week for their mother to come and get them, and she never does. So it's a story about what happens to the girls at the school, what happens to Gertie, and when they do reunite, it's a story about forgiveness and redemption, and the reader finds out, what has been happening behind the scenes. So it's very much about character development. It's a family saga that stretches over decades. And as I said, it's ultimately about redemption.
Do you have a favorite character in the story?
I would have to say that Nora, the daughter, is actually one of the daughters is actually my favorite character. I feel like I can relate to her because she spends a lot of her life being very critical of her mother, and I can definitely relate to that. So she only sees her mother's choices and her mother's actions from the perspective of what a child would see and what a child would judge. But as she goes on and becomes a mother herself, and then ultimately finds the remains of, some things that her mother left behind, it's then that she suddenly gets this epiphany of, what her mother's life was really like. And there's a softening to her and a forgiveness. And I feel like I can definitely relate to that.
Is there a favorite line from the novel that resonates with you?
Well, there is. It's so hard to pick one line, right? I do have I don't know if I have the space, but if I could just read a couple of lines. This is, this comes at towards the end of the novel, and Nora finds a letter from her sister Patsy, and she is talking about this painting that she did, and it's similar to the prodigal son story. And so this is the letter, part of the letter that Patsy leaves for Nora. And who's to say who's who in this story? The truth is that each of us at some point or another have been the father, the prodigal, and the older son. All of us have squandered our inheritance and then regretted it. All of us have been angry and judgmental. All of us have rejoiced in the finding of a lost child, the dead resurrected. I'll stop there. That's pretty much the heart of the novel is that concept of being the judged, the one judged, and or the one making the judgment and the one who was kind of standing on the side thinking that the situation was unfair. So yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Was there a piece of historical research that has stayed with you since you discovered it?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of this comes from a personal history. So there's that. But I was doing some research on this school that the woman who I named Gertie said that she went to. So it was in Park Ridge, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And apparently, there was a real school. It wasn't called the Park Ridge School for Girls, which is what it's called in the novel. But I was able to research, and it is no longer there. It's morphed into something else. But I did find in the Chicago Tribune an article from the 1950s about a scandal that they had uncovered at the school, and that there were these cottages where the girls stayed, and under one of the cottages, they found a dungeon, which some of the girls were put into as a punishment. And that was not part of the story that Gertie told me, nor of Nora's story, but I just thought that was such a fascinating detail that I did incorporate that into the novel. So that has stuck with me all this time. It was pretty shocking.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing the story behind The Fallen Woman's Daughter. It's always fascinating to see how history and imagination come together to give voice to stories that might otherwise remain in the background. And for those of you watching, I hope this conversation has offered a deeper glimpse into the layers behind historical fiction, the research, the characters, and the moments that continue to resonate beyond the page. If The Fallen Woman's Daughter has sparked your curiosity, you can find it at your favorite bookstore or through your local public library. If you enjoy stepping behind the books you read, you'll find more conversations like this here on Author Notes. Until next time, happy reading.